It's small business protection that won't break the bank. Online quotes available at progressivecommercial.com.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore, in for David Brancaccio. The Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago today with a primetime speech from President Biden. And while Democrats will be touting his administration's accomplishments, Vice President Kamala Harris's economic message to voters is taking a slightly different tone than what we've heard the last 4 years. Marketplace's Nova Safo has more from Chicago.
From the start, the Biden administration has been focused on things such as avoiding a second recession, which would have derailed the pandemic recovery. And on that score, one could argue that they've succeeded.
We have the best economy in the world right now. We had the best COVID economic response.
Caitlin Legacki was a senior advisor in Biden's Commerce Department, but she concedes that the administration did initially miss an important detail. The macro economy doesn't necessarily translate to the micro level.
When you're talking to families and real Americans, they're not really interested in how their standing compares to Europeans. They care about what's happening in their own pocketbook. And so I think early on, we probably could have been more responsive to that.
Legacki says Kamala Harris's campaign has learned from that misstep. She's now proposing things like limits on grocery price increases and down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers. Kathleen Dolan is a political science professor at the University of Wisconsin.
She's putting a clearer focus on language about helping, working and middle-class families and identifying some of the specific challenges that people face.
But offering new plans means they'll be up for scrutiny, and Republican challenger Donald Trump over the weekend assailed Harris's proposals.
After causing catastrophic inflation, Comrade Kamala announced that she wants to institute socialist price controls. You saw that. Never worked before, never ever worked.
Right now, Harris appears to have some headway to chart a new path. A new poll finds that most Americans believe she had limited influence on the Biden administration's economic policies. The Democrats' task during the convention this week will be to convince undecided voters that under Harris, the next 4 years will be better for their pocketbooks than the last. In Chicago, I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. Dow futures are down just 15 points. That is less than 0.1%. S&P and NASDAQ futures are up less than 0.1%. And the yield on the 10-year Treasury is 3.881%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager, designed to empower travelers who need access to secure logins from any device and any place. Available to download at bitwarden.com. And by Amazon Business, focused on offering smart business buying solutions, leaving time to focus on growth. More at amazonbusiness.com.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has issued an executive order directing state agencies to remove homeless encampments and strongly encouraging local governments to do the same. It was followed by a threat: clear encampments or risk losing state funding. The strict policy stance comes after the Supreme Court earlier this summer made it easier for cities to remove homeless encampments. For more on how the High Court's ruling is unfolding, Marketplace's David Brancaccio spoke with Ann Oliva, CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness.
All right, this is the law of the land now. Where are unhoused people in California that had been living in encampments? Where are they going to go?
That's the question that everybody's asking. We know that in California, the state really only has capacity to shelter about 39% of the homeless population each night. So a lot of people are staying in encampments, not because they want to, it's because they have to. There's literally nowhere else for them to go.
I think people listening to this are trying to get their heads around what happens to people who are in encampments. I mean, does this become a criminal justice issue?
It could be. As people get fined or ticketed or arrested, that does increase the number of people who are in the criminal legal system. And even for people who just get fines, if they had money to pay a fine, they would be staying in a hotel, just to be clear. So what happens is that those fines don't get paid and they rack up. It impacts somebody's ability to get an apartment down the road. It impacts their ability to get a job. And often those kinds of things can turn into bench warrants. And what we expect to see as enforcement increases across the state of California is folks being pushed into communities that don't actually have the infrastructure to serve them. And all of those things are bad for communities, and they're bad for people who are experiencing homelessness.
I mean, many experts tell us that while substance abuse and mental health are important issues in homelessness, the key overriding issue is the cost of housing in America.
That's right. The evidence is overwhelming on this point. The common denominator amongst all people who are experiencing housing instability, who are at risk of homelessness, and who are experiencing homelessness is the fact that they don't have a safe, stable, and affordable place to live. That is considered the base by which people can make changes in their lives and address different things that they want to address in terms of their goals. But it's really hard to go get a job when you don't have a place to lay your head at night.
Now, I don't want to leave it right there. There is data showing homelessness among military veterans is going in the right direction. Have you seen that at work?
The programs that serve veterans who are experiencing homelessness in particular are resourced quite well by the federal government. We have permanent supportive housing. We have other types of more temporary help through the VA as well as through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So it follows that when we have really strong leadership on ending veterans' homelessness, when we have really strong resources at the local community level and at the national level, and when we have smart policies like getting people into permanent housing with the services that they need, that homelessness goes down for those folks. And veterans tend to have a lot of support from many different areas of the government.
Always good to talk to Ann Oliva from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ann Oliva was speaking with Marketplace's David Brancaccio there. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.